stage, I've got one of my favorite writers who's working on a novel and has been for the past 4 years, Mr. Ryan Pangilinan.
Yeah! Aww.
Man, are you guys in for a treat? So how's Michelle, everybody? Is she awesome? She's totally awesome.
Yeah.
Not because we're both the progeny of single mothers, but also because X-Men was like our introduction into comic books. When I was 6, I went to Fred Meyer with my mom, and she let me get a copy of X-Men. Now, to backtrack a little, like as I said earlier, I'm also the product of a single-parent home, and so as a result of such, I didn't have any real positive male role models. Like I kind of knew who my dad was, but not really until I was like 13. And so the people that I looked up to on television were dudes like Mr. T and Knight Rider, but not David Hasselhoff, Kit the Car, because he always knew what to do, and he just, and he was a car. I mean, you're 6 and you're like, yeah. But my mom let me buy this copy of X-Men when I was a kid, and I was just stuck on comic books, and I became obsessed with it growing up, which, definitely makes my social awkwardness now as an adult very relevant. In any case, comic books in the 1980s and the 90s, if you remember, were like this big force, and everyone was buying shit and just being like, yo, this is going to be like the cash cow, and around the same time, like, they were adapting comic book characters into television shows, and so if you grew up in the late 80s and the early 90s, comic books became synonymous with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, I like to start, part of the story is that comic books has directly contributed to my delinquency, both as a youth and as an adult, which is kind of sad to admit in public. The first time that I ever did anything bad was related to the Ninja Turtles, and here's why. For a brief period, the Ninja Turtles did a mall tour where they would hire guys to dress up in costume and do like karate kicks and all this other fancy shit on stage at shopping malls. And of course, to an 8-year-old kid, you're like, this is fucking awesome. I get to see rubber-suited ninjas and turtles and all kinds of fancy stuff. And it's like a cartoon coming to life. So being, the kid from the single-parent home, it was really easy to guilt my mom into letting me cut school to go watch the Ninja Turtles perform at Northgate Mall when I was 8.
Okay.
So I went there and watched the turtles, like kick the air and punch shit and all that fun stuff. Side note, I later found out that Michael Ian Black was part of the Ninja Turtle touring group, so it's quite possible that I could have met and or seen him. Which is something that I keep in here as a total state nerd, but I digress. I remember after seeing the Turtles do their act, I went and got Donatello's autograph. And I remember telling my friends the next day, I was like, Donatello's the best one because he's smart and he's brilliant and he's like the scientist one. But I think I just said that because he was the one Ninja Turtle that nobody was talking to. Like, everybody was going up to Leonardo and Raphael because they're like fighters and whatever, but, whatever. You take what you can get when you're 8. This kind of pattern with my obsession with comic books and how it affected my life kept going throughout my adulthood when I started to realize that comic books are inadvertently responsible for my romantic retardation and my inability to grasp the English language. One of the comic book characters that I relate closely to is Batman, and by extension Bruce Wayne. Like, I have a Batman tattoo, and then I've seen all the fucking movies, and I own all these like really weird comics. I think part of the reason why Batman speaks to me for 2 reasons. Number one, he's a psychopath whose his whole idea is just vengeance, right? And who doesn't like that? I mean, you grew up in the 80s and you watch shit like Dirty Harry and Death Wish, and you're like, that clicks to the male sensibility. But again, I grew up in a single-parent home, primarily with a woman, so it's the women fucking Batman over that appeals to that other sense of my head, where Batman, or Bruce Wayne, in some circles, intentionally goes after women who screw him over. Like, he only bangs chicks who are out to kill him, whether it's Catwoman, or Ra's al Ghul's daughter, who he sires a son with, who turns out to be a fucking assassin, which is super fucked up, by the way. Like, how would you like, sire a child and be like, oh, my son's an assassin, this is awesome. It's not. It's like, I wonder what Ted Bundy's parents feel like. Probably like Bruce Wayne. But yeah, as I've gotten older, like, I feel like both figuratively and literally, in some cases, I've walked away with scarring from some of these women that I choose to date, and I place the blame squarely on comic books. Of course, some of it might have to do with the fact that sometimes I suggest that I wear a cape and cowl into bed, and say that they should dress up like Catwoman or Batgirl or the Black Canary, and then they just make their way out the door. I don't know. But yeah, it's still a problem that I'm wrestling with and I'm still dealing with, and I think sometimes I'm just like, I may continue to make these awful choices in relationships and dating women who are out to emotionally get me, but I'm just writing the next chapter of the great story arc in the comic book that is my life. Alright, well, that's my time. Everybody have a good day.
Yeah, Ryan! Yeah! Moment. It was a moment.
That's kind of sexually harassing. But it's okay, I like hugs.